Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. We are holding a press conference today. MORE-UFT caucus, along with Press NYC, elected officials, students, other parent groups. We'll be talking about why we reject the deal that the mayor and the union rep made to reopen schools prematurely. And as we introduce folks, we will share the organizational affiliation that they have. And just so everyone knows, this meeting is being recorded, and we will share it afterwards to folks who are unable to make it. So we will get started. Thank you again, everyone, so much. My name is Marilena Marchetti. I'm an occupational therapist. I work in Brooklyn schools. And we are here today to discuss parents, teachers, students, and union allies, why we are opposed to the deal that the mayor and our union president, Michael Mulgrew, agreed upon to reopen schools prematurely. And our first speaker today will be Gia Lee. Gia Lee is a special education teacher in Manhattan and has many other titles. If you can go ahead and introduce yourself and let us hear what you have to say.
I welcome everyone, educators, parents, students, allies. We welcome the press to this space as well, because we feel as though none of our voices have been heard throughout this entire process, that the reopening plans, the guidances, that has not included any of us. And we want to say that enough is enough. We're angry. We're frustrated. We're beyond words at this point. It was one thing for our union leadership to start us off by saying, as a movement and rank and file educator, a member of the United Federation of Teachers, I'm a proud union member. I'm also a parent of New York City Public Schools. I've been a teacher for almost 20 years in the system, and time again, we face absolute disrespect. Deals being made by predominantly men behind closed doors for a profession that is 82% women and predominantly populations of Black and brown families. We are never given a voice, and enough is enough. So this deal that was made came off the heels of chapters. I'm a chapter leader, the heels of being told to prepare for a strike. And a lot of us knew that some deal was being negotiated, and sure enough, if folks saw what happened at 9:30 a.m., shortly thereafter, there was a press conference. The outcomes of the negotiation were told first on the media. So the Department of Education and our own union leadership didn't have the respect to reach out to its members, to reach out to the families, to inform us of decisions that were being made. We heard it on the news. This is disrespectful. It's confusing. It caused much chaos, especially for our families who have no clue, who've been in the dark. I'm sorry, but we keep hearing time and time again that parents had this choice. They did not have a choice. Giving them door number 1, door number 2, door number 3, without clear indications or descriptions of what any of these learning modalities would look like is not a choice. So that's number 1. The same thing with this negotiation. We were not consulted. The terms of this 2-week delay, all they've done is kick the can down the road further. This sudden change in randomized testing of 10 or 15 to 20% of the school building randomly starting in October is not good enough for us. It doesn't give us the kind of security when we were talking about building-based health measures. We still have not received building inspection reports that were completed by the UF team. We have a right, and we need to be respected as people who actually work in these buildings to have this information. We still don't know what we're walking into. The UFT told us not to go into our buildings this week. And then all of a sudden yesterday, we were told it's okay to go back starting September 8th. This is very confusing. We're tired of being treated as if our voices don't matter, that we're nothing, that none of our day-to-day lives, the decisions that we have to make, the planning and the preparation that it takes to actually get going for our school year been zero input. None of the guidance still makes sense. We still have too many questions and concerns about how to even begin even remote learning, let alone blended learning, in 2 weeks. It's not enough. They've only kicked the can down the road. We demand equity. We demand a Black Lives Matter centered movement for our students in a safe reopening. We need to only reopen when it's absolutely safe, and we don't have those safeguards. I'm going to stop there because I know the speakers following after me also have a ton to say, and we're not going to take this anymore. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was Gia Lee, special education teacher in Manhattan and chapter leader. Our next speaker will be William Deep. He is a student who organizes with Teens Take Charge. Go ahead, William.
Thank you so much, and good afternoon, everyone. I first want to thank the MORE Caucus for hosting this press conference with teachers and parents and students because the mayor doesn't want to interact with us. So my name is William Deep, and I'm a rising high school senior at the Brooklyn Latin School and a member of Teens Take Charge, which is a student-led organization fighting for educational equity in the New York City public school system. And I first want to say that I feel betrayed. I feel betrayed that even though students and families and teachers are the ones who are building and making our schools like the way it is, the mayor and chancellor are the ones who are taking credit for it. But when the mayor and Mulgrew came together and made this negotiation, they forgot about us. 2 weeks is nothing. Nothing. Will the virus go away in 2 weeks? No. Will the virus be cured in 2 weeks? No. Will we have our answers to the millions and millions of questions that we have on school reopenings in 2 weeks? No. As a student who struggled with remote learning in the past spring, I am urging everyone, every student, to advocate for the delay on the reopening of schools until it is safe to enter these schools. The mayor has said that he will not reopen indoor dining. Why is he reopening schools? As someone who struggled with remote learning, I urge every single person to advocate for this delay in the reopening of schools. And while the mayor is safe at his home at Gracie Mansion, students and teachers and parents are risking their lives for the education that we all deserve. I don't want to risk my life for my education, and I don't want to risk my family's lives, and hope that no one else has to risk their lives for the education that we all deserve. The mayor has said that, and the mayor says that he advocates for those who have been oppressed and discriminated against, but this negotiation only continues to express these inequities and these forms of oppression against our marginalized students, families, and teachers. And to close off, because I know everyone else has such amazing points that they want to bring on, I want to leave off with this question. Mayor, if you're going to watch this soon, and you better watch this soon because you have not interacted with a single student or teacher or parent on this reopening process, do you not care about our lives? Thank you.
Thank you so much, William, for the student perspective. Our next speaker will be Dr. Kalira Salas Ramirez. She is a DOE parent and CEC president. Go ahead, Kalira.
Hello, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Kalira Salas, and I am the president of CEC4. I am also the proud parent of a rising fourth grader at Central Park East 1. In addition, I'm a member of Press NYC that has delineated at least 8 deal breakers which we are concerned about when it comes to going back to school. And to be honest, this pandemic has highlighted all of the inequities that exist within the educational system. And as parents this summer, we haven't stopped. It's been ongoing work in terms of trying to figure out what the heck the Department of Education is trying to do with our children. And we have zero answers. As parents, we've held forums, we've reached out to scientists, me being a scientist myself, we've done the research, we've compared principal playbooks to see what types of guidance the Department of Education is giving our educators and our principals, because we have no idea what the Department of Education, what Mayor de Blasio is thinking of doing with our children. And we firmly believe that our children are not safe going back to school. We've held forums, we've supported each other, but more importantly, we stand in solidarity with our teachers. We understand that this is a life or death situation. It's not about, which model of remote learning we're going to use or hybrid learning we're going to use. It's really about people's lives and their existence that's in question. We still have a lot of questions, and this notion that we've had a choice in any of this is completely false. In District 4, we're still waiting to have inspections of our buildings. We have 23 schools and only 9 schools have been inspected. Meanwhile, in Harlem alone, 51 schools have failed their inspections. And so how is it that we're supposed to feel confident that our children are going to be safe? In terms of guidance provided by the Department of Education, there's a lack of clarity on how we're going to support English language learners, students with IEPs. There's no busing contract to get the children. And this whole notion, this morning we were told, oh, you should have gotten a survey. Parents that have children with IEPs should have gotten a survey to determine how you want services mandated, federally mandated services delivered to you, where we had the opportunity to choose whether we wanted remote or whether we wanted in-person services. But this morning I was told, we don't know whether that's really gonna happen. And so there's still so many questions. In terms of childcare, the mayor and the chancellor promised 100,000 seats of childcare through the program of Learning Bridges. That still is in question as well. So how is it that you're really supporting families through this time? Our communities, our Black and Latinx communities, have been ravaged by this virus. And we are still healing, and we're still grieving, and we're still trying to deal with the notion of what is normalcy supposed to look like for our children. And a 2-week delay is not going to provide us with the confidence. The gaslighting is real. We don't understand how we're supposed to engage with the Department of Education when we're not being asked, and we're the ones that are going through all this trauma ourselves with our children. The protocols implemented are developmentally inappropriate. They don't respond to our needs, and they're completely inequitable. And so just like William Deep asked, Mayor, do you really care about what families need? And I just want to reiterate that we are here standing in solidarity with our teachers, and we will not go back to school until it's safe.
Thank you so much, Dr. Salas. Our next speaker will be Tamika Solomon. Tamika Solomon is a District 75 special education teacher in the Bronx. Go ahead, Tamika.
Good afternoon, everyone. First, I'd like to thank GLE for inviting me today, and just to share a little bit about who I am and the work that I do, and a little bit about our district. So I've been a special education teacher for 22 years. Of those 22 years, I worked in District 75 for 16. So we provide special education services to the most vulnerable students in the city of New York. We have approximately 69 schools, 300 sites, including a site in Syosset, New York, which is a part of Nassau County. We also provide students that are hospitalized or are at home and cannot get to the school building for whatever reason. We service students with autism, developmental delays, as well as mental health challenges. Our students are the most vulnerable, and they face the most obstacles. Our parents are often not empowered and really do not know how to advocate for themselves, much less their children, so they in turn become voiceless. Our teachers are the most dedicated and often the most ignored. District 75 is an afterthought. It's like, oh yeah, what about District 75? So our teachers become an extension of family for our students. Teachers often spend a lot of their own personal time and personal money helping students, because they don't even have basic things that they would need to have in one of the richest cities in the country. you know, the work we do, we're just as
Hello?
unique. Hello? I'm sorry. We're just as unique as our students, and the work we do cannot be forgotten. In fact, we should be the priority because when our most vulnerable and our most fragile are taken care of, everyone does well. But if District 75 suffers, everyone suffers, and that's exactly what has been happening, not just during this pandemic, but for many, many decades at this point. As teachers, we aren't even a part of our collective bargaining agreement. There's nothing in the contract that speaks specifically to what we do, because the work we do is very different than the work of our general ed counterparts. So when you look at remote learning has impacted our students the most. They cannot access remote learning. Many of our students don't even know how to manipulate a mouse. So how are they going to be able to engage in remote or distance learning? So we have been impacted more than any other population across the city. And even though most of our parents want our students to be back in school because we provide so much support to families, it's really a matter of life and death at this point. And we do want to come back to work, but we want to do so safely. In March, District 75 lost the most staff members than any other district across the city. So it's really time the mayor and the chancellor have prided themselves in it's a tale of two cities and that they were going to dismantle that. But this pandemic has highlighted that their policies do not support what they said they were going to do. It still continues to be a tale of two cities. It continues to be the have and the have-not, and it continues to impact Black and Brown communities. And it's unfortunate because we are one of the richest cities in the country, and yet there's so much that we lack. So I really hope that teachers take a bold stand and say this is enough. This is enough. We demand more, we deserve more, and we expect more. And I thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you so much, Tamika, for speaking for teachers and school staff and parents who attend District 75 schools. Your voices have not been heard or respected in this decision-making process. Thank you so much. Our next speaker will be Taj Sutton. She's a parent leader and CEC president in District 14.
Thank you, Marilena, and thank you everyone who's spoken thus far. You guys can't see me because I'm frustrated. And we've spent the entire summer working in solidarity with students, with parents, with school staff, and the fact that that is being overlooked by the very same leaders claiming to be in community with us and in collaboration with us is an abomination. It would be an abomination before a global pandemic and racial justice uprising, and it is particularly grating and infuriating right now. There are so many intersections being overlooked in this pandemic, and rather than utilize this as an opportunity to do better, it seems that our leaders are doubling down and saying my way or the highway, even though they're being provided by the folks on the ground who are the most impacted the opportunity to do better and the modes with which to do better. The Alliance for Quality Education released a roadmap to healing-centered schools. MORE Caucus has released an outline. Press NYC has released so many deal breakers that we have all been expressing in our own different ways throughout this pandemic. And to get a week and a half delay after spending all summer saying that we don't have the personnel, the funding, or the infrastructure to reopen schools safely, quite frankly, is a slap in the face. Please do not allow, press that's here, please do not allow this opportunity to become a rubber stamp or for them to say, look, we did what the community asked. The teachers and the parents and the students asked for a delay and we gave it to them. Because we didn't only ask for a delay, we asked for resources, we asked for a cultural paradigm shift, we asked that our Black and Latinx, that our low income, that our English language learners, that our disabled students get the resources and the respect and the restoration of their humanity within our educational system that they have always deserved. And we haven't gotten any of those things. We're gonna have bullshit delay as a distraction. And so while I honor the work that MORE and our teachers and parents have done to get even that delay, because it was a fight, I also want to acknowledge that it is not enough. It is not what we asked for, and it does not solve the problems that will persist, whether we go back September 21st or October 21st, if our governor, chancellor, and mayor do not dig deep and do better. I want to call on the press who's here and the folks who hear this at a later date to make sure that you are telling the story of all these folks on the ground saying the same thing. Make sure you are reporting on events like the People's Pet, where over 200 community members spoke with one voice and said, schools are not ready to reopen. We don't have what we need. We do not feel safe. Not our students, not our families, or our school staffs. That should mean something in New York City. And if it doesn't, then maybe we need to rethink leadership and put some folks in power who are going to serve us and our needs as opposed to their own agenda. People over protocols and people power over the economy. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Taj Sutton. Thank you so much. Our next speaker will be Sean Petty. He is a nurse, member of NISNA, and parent of a student in the DOE. Go ahead, Sean.
Yeah, so I think the first thing, we have to talk about from a public health standpoint is that we all need to remind ourselves that the United States remains the absolute worst nation in the entire world in response to this virus. We have the worst outcomes. We've had the highest death rates. We now are approaching 200,000 dead across the country. And we still have no national coherent testing and tracing infrastructure. We still have no national system of producing and distributing personal protective equipment and sanitizing equipment to hospitals and schools. This is a major factor in terms of our ability to combat this virus. To quote a statement from my union, the New York State Nurses Association, we said, New York cannot remain a sheltered island in a national storm surge of COVID-19. Pandemics don't work that way, especially as many New Yorkers have traveled extensively throughout the summer. And we also have to remind ourselves that because of economic considerations, especially in February and March, Mayor de Blasio and Governor Cuomo delayed the closure of schools to begin with at this outbreak, against the advice of public health experts, which caused thousands of unnecessary deaths. So we already know that there are major other considerations that these politicians are weighing above and beyond the health and safety of our school communities. During March and April, we in the hospital systems and we in the public hospital system in particular saw the devastating consequences of these mistakes when we were overwhelmed, unprepared, and under-resourced. Since that time, the city and the state have done a marginally better job than other localities in this country at developing some testing and tracing infrastructure, but it is nowhere near enough. We still have weeks, in many localities, people can't get a test on the weekend, people can't get a test in the evening. On many localities, the testing is delayed to 7 to 10 days. I was just upstate on vacation last week, and just for the hell of it, I decided to see what the testing availability was. You could not get a test anywhere within a 30 to 50 mile radius, except for during limited hours during the week. And those tests take 7 to 10 days to get back. These are in counties with known outbreaks. These are in counties where, for instance, in SUNY Oneonta, when they went back to school, saw an outbreak of dozens of students that they couldn't contain, and they had to go 100% remote. So we know that even in the state with the marginally better testing and tracing infrastructure, it is still nowhere near enough to be able to go to in-person schooling in any sort of safe way. If New York State was a country, it would be the 10th largest economy in the world. Much less resourced countries like South Korea, Vietnam, New Zealand have effectively contained and all but eliminated the threat of this virus from their populations. There have been extensive public health measures that we, the richest city in the world, have yet to adopt. We cannot let our political leaders give up on the goal of eliminating this virus from New York City. And opening schools in this context means exactly that. It means giving up on that goal. It means accepting a certain amount of ongoing illness and death. And it will be school workers and communities of color who will be the first to suffer and who have suffered the most already from that strategy of accepting that certain amount of ongoing illness and death that reopening schools will continue to perpetuate. We still have not even come close to winning the war on this virus, either nationally or even here in New York State. And we still need to have that as a goal. We cannot responsibly implement drastic measures such as reopening in-person schooling that will undoubtedly overtax the already minimal infrastructure that we have to combat this virus. The other component to this is that not only are we nowhere close to ready infrastructure-wise, we will be less ready a month from now. It's a profound contradiction to us and to me personally as a city worker when we hear all of these promises of resources that are going to come from the city to open schools safely, when on the same breath, on the other side of the mouth of the mayor, and we have promises of layoffs. We have promises of 22,000 city worker layoffs. These are school workers. These are hospital workers. How are we going to have this robust infrastructure in place when in less than a month, on October 1st, there's the promise of 22,000 city worker layoffs? That's a contradiction that nobody has an answer to. So what this amounts to, what these plans amount to, are unfunded mandates. They're plans that are even at the best, even if they're implemented to their full extent, are not enough, but they're also implemented without being resourced. They're also mandates that are not being resourced, and we have no reason to believe that they will be resourced. So they're doomed to fail. The plans that even already exist that are inadequate, they're still doomed to fail. And what will happen is when they do fail, they will attempt to blame individual schools and teachers and the communities for that failure, as opposed to the inadequacy of the plans and the inadequacy of the resources to begin with. We will not let them play these political and economic shell games with our lives. Governor Cuomo needs to tax the rich to fully fund a true response to this virus and to eradicate the racist inequities that plague our city and our state. Mayor de Blasio needs to keep in-person schooling closed until a far more robust testing and tracing infrastructure is truly in place and new cases can truly be identified and contained. We will continue to do whatever it takes to make this happen, and we fully support our teachers in doing the same. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sean, for speaking with us on your break from work. Solidarity, Sean, thank you. Our next speaker will be Matt Gonzalez. Matt Gonzalez is policy coach with Integrate NYC and NYU Metro Center. Go ahead, Matt.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me. My name is Matt Gonzalez. I'm a youth organizer and work with many parent organizations across New York City who are committed to educational equity. I've also was really proud to work with the MORE Caucus and the Alliance for Quality Education to draft the Slow Down to Save Lives letter, which at this point has over 1,000 signatures of educators, parents, students, community members, administrators, who all consistently have said, among the many other parents and educators and letters that have come out, like over 50 letters that have come out calling on the mayor, the chancellor, the union to slow down this reopening so that we can actually save and preserve the lives, particularly the lives of Black and brown young people in our city. What we know is that the approach, this so-called deal that was announced behind closed doors by the mayor and the UFT clearly was designed and created without the community voices of parents and students and teachers. Clearly, that plan, that deal has done nothing to address the budgetary gaps that the city is facing. That deal has done nothing to actually provide time in the, what is it, like 2 weeks or 8 days or something that were being offered up to actually correct some of the planning issues that were described on this call. And that deal does nothing to address the complete lack of conversation around how to actually improve and elevate and support remote learning. We have not heard anything about remote learning since the city went to remote learning in March. We have not learned about what kinds of training, support systems, or resources are going to be needed to actually make that work. Because even in a world of blended learning, there is still need for remote learning. And so the deal that was announced yesterday, to my eyes, as a person who's not in the union, was a failure. But after listening to and hearing our partners from the union, at least from the movement of rank and file educators, that this is a betrayal to them and not a legitimate deal for them. I think we're in a moment when the mayor, the chancellor, president of the U of T, Mike Mulgrew, need to actually slow down and listen to the community members' voices and respect that there are concerns and there are needs and there are priorities that we have laid out in over 50 letters at this point that have basically been ignored. And so I'm here to speak to the governor who, as our previous speaker said, needs to tax the wealthy and truly fund our schools, while just making comments about his concern about this plan. He's done nothing to actually fund our schools equitably through his entire term as a governor and during the coronavirus. And so we also need our mayor to slow down. We need the chancellor to slow down, and we need the president of the U of T to actually represent the voices of the rank and file educators. And so until all of this happens, I myself, as an organizer, as an educator, and as an advocate, will stand in solidarity with our educators, with our school leaders who are saying to stop and to slow down. And I will promise my efforts and advocacy will be used to support your voices and make sure that young people's voices are centered in this conversation too. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Matt. Our next speaker will be parent Jessamine Lee. She's a parent of a student in District 14. Go ahead, Jessamine.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. My name is Jessamine Lee.
It's a little hard to hear you.
Okay.
Thank you.
A little closer. My name is Jessamine Lee, and I am a parent of 2 students in District 14. I'm also a former DOE educator, taught ESL in the city schools for many, many years. And I'm here today to talk about special education as a parent of a student in the DOE's Autism Spectrum Disorder NEST program. I have read the DOE's proposal to the state for reopening. I have read the state's guidance on reopening. And I have to say, in the chancellor's words, in the mayor's words about, how vulnerable our students with disabilities are, there is an extraordinary amount of duplicity and double talk happening. When you look at the state's guidance, when you look at the DOE's plan, there are explicit loopholes to violate our students' rights to a free and appropriate education. There are explicit loopholes to violate the IDEA Act, the Americans with Disabilities Act. Our students will be shortchanged. And when you look at the DOE's blended model, and yes, overwhelmingly across the city, special education parents are being pressured by the DOE to adopt the blended learning model versus the remote model. There is no way for students in ICT or SETS classes to have their least restrictive environment honored. There's just not, it's not possible. So our students are being set up to have their civil rights violated, to be denied their free and appropriate public education. And this is simply not staffable. And you know, the deal signed by or endorsed by Mike Mulgrew to effectively double the size of remote learning for blended learners is ridiculous. Those class cohorts on the remote learning days will be double sized. Not only is that bad practice for all students, but for students with disabilities, it is contrary to the entire idea of an individualized education plan. Many of our students rely on busing. The bus contract issue is still a huge debacle. I don't know how students are supposed to access their free and appropriate public education without being able to get to school. And you know, this whole situation is completely fraught. It's especially fraught, I feel, for related service providers. I don't know how related service providers, particularly where IEPs stipulate that students get provided services in a separate location, are supposed to do that safely. Related service providers work very closely, physically closely with their students. It's just not possible to execute this in a safe way that is both safe for students and for teachers. And you know, I feel that the DOE acted in bad faith last spring when remote learning started, when it came to students with disabilities. Parents were issued remote learning plans for their students. Unlike IEPs, these documents were not co-created. And these remote learning plans truncated related service sessions as well as special education content area teaching hours. Thus far, the DOE has not A, acknowledged this, or B, made any effort to compensate for these deficiencies. And their lack of guidance thus far indicates that they fully intend to shortchange our kids going forward. You know, if this crisis were to have a catchphrase, it would be, we're awaiting guidance on that. Every time we ask questions, that is all we hear. And I don't see how this plan is staffable. I don't see how if it could be staffable, how it could be safe. And I foresee the 200,000 plus special education students in this city losing out on their access to education this year. Additionally, I have been struck over and over and over again. I know the DOE so well. I've worked for the DOE. You know, I've been a parent in the DOE for many years. The DOE is an organization, as others have noted, that is overwhelmingly run by women. And we look and we see our mayor and our chancellor and even our union reps, all these men making decisions despite the words of wisdom, the expertise, the knowledge, the experience of thousands and thousands and thousands of women. And the only way I can explain it is there is structural misogyny at play. Women are not being believed. And when this crisis implodes, it will disproportionately negatively affect women at home on the parent end. And you know, our leaders need to do better. They need to do better by our students. They need to do better by our educators, and they need to do this safely. This spring, I had the terrible experience of having to explain the death of a teacher to one of my children. I don't ever want to have to explain that again. It is wholly unnecessary. And for that reason, and all the other reasons I delineated above, schools need to remain closed until it is safe. Thank you for this opportunity to speak. Please complete your census if you haven't, and please register to vote.
Thank you so much, Jessamine, for your testimony and for reminding us that we've all had very deep losses because of this crisis and that we have a lot of heartache. And this is matters of the heart that we're talking about. Thank you, Jessamine, so much. Our next speaker will be James Para. James Para is a UFT paraprofessional who works in Brooklyn. Go ahead, James.
Hi, thank you for having me. Before I do begin, I just want to point out and applaud the MORE Caucus for doing the work that our union should be doing and that Michael Mugro should be spearheading and has not done so far. So thank you, MORE. Without you, none of us would have a voice in this very critical moment. I am a paraprofessional in District 14, and I can say right now, as previous speakers have said, paras have not received any sort of guidance for what our jobs will look like. We work with children with disabilities, English language learners, and students with IEPs, which is a legal document we have to adhere by. We have been completely shut out of this conversation. Anytime we ask our school leaders, they are telling us they don't have the information that we so desperately need to do our jobs. The mayor, the chancellor, the governor, and the UFT president is failing all of us. Paraprofessionals' job requires us to be with our students. We work one-on-one with these students all day. We can't do that while social distancing. Our most vulnerable students, who happen to be BIPOC students as well, are going to suffer from this plan that hasn't been thought out. It is inadequate and fails on so many different levels. It is frustrating to have to deal with this the entire summer and since March. There has been no word. Our UFT para chapter has been completely silent. They have not been fighting for paraprofessionals. They haven't said a word. How are we supposed to feel safe and reassured to do our jobs when no one in leadership is telling us this is what is expected of us? And to the mayor and to the chancellor, I would say this. You can say Black Lives Matter, you can write them on the streets, but as of this moment and throughout this entire pandemic, you have shown us that Black Lives Matter do not matter to you. And I take that as personally as you will, because our most vulnerable educators, our paras, our students are going to suffer the most from this plan. And it is frustrating, and I am past anger at this point with our supposed leaders who aren't taking into consideration our voices, our opinions, and our thoughts. The inequities we are seeing in this moment are not new. They have existed within the DOE for decades. This is a result of continual defunding of our education system. Our students have been suffering for decades and for years. Right now is a pivotal moment for our leaders to reimagine education in a way that benefits and includes all of our students, all of our parents, all of our educators. And as of right now, our mayor, our chancellor, and our UFT representatives are not doing that. They are leaving our most vulnerable communities behind. And it is a slap in the face to every single person who works in a school building, our parents, our service providers, our guidance counselors, our nurses. Every single one of us know the risks of going back to in-person learning. And our voices have been ignored. It's enough is enough. People are going to die. The mayor is playing with our lives, with the lives of our families and the lives of those within our community. Not one life more. Enough is enough. If Black lives matter to you, mayor, to you, chancellor, show them action. We want action. And right now you haven't been doing that. It's frustrating. And I thank MORE for giving paras the voice that we haven't had in this conversation. And I just want our leaders to act. And again, I will reiterate this to the death of me. We are not unwilling to work. We want to work, but we want to do so safely. And if our mayor and our chancellor really cared about us, instead of spending these last few months over an inadequate plan, they would have spent these last few months sending in resources to make and funding to make remote learning the best it can be and as equitable as it can be for all of our students, families, and educators. Enough is enough. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much, James. Thank you so much for everyone's testimony. It's been very moving. I just want to add that paraprofessional lives were lost at a disproportionately high rate of UFT members who were lost to COVID. And the idea that they're being sent back to school without any guidance or support is unacceptable. We stand in solidarity with our paras. Thank you, James. And our next speaker will be Carla Narvaez. She's a high school executive director of Integrate NYC. Go ahead, Carla.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me here, and thank you to everyone who has spoke their truth. I'm Carla Narvaez, a high school executive director at Integrate NYC and a rising 11th grader in New York City's public school system. We are all here to represent and stand with the almost 700 signatures of elected leaders, community-based organization, parents, teachers, administrators, and students who are calling to delay the reopening of in-person schooling. As a student myself, I am honestly very concerned for the well-being of staff members and students that are going back to in-person learning and the quality of remote learning. The mayor and New York City Department of Education wants us to go back to school, yet the mayor doesn't want to voluntarily allow people to eat indoors, whereas our jobs for teachers, our education, our schools are mandatory. They're putting us in danger, and there are still students out there who have not been provided with the right resources to learn at full capacity in remote learning and even in-person learning before COVID. These students that are being stripped of these opportunities and resources are predominantly Black, Latinx, low income, and special education learners. And that says something a lot about our system and the people who refuse to hear our voices. They want to put our health and lives in danger, and they never prioritize our education. 2 weeks is not enough for the mayor and the people in charge of reopening schools to do what we have been asking for. And everyone involved in the reopening does not care about the well-being of our lives.
And communities of color, when facing the dangerous attack that you all are facing on your lives. You know, a previous speaker said that, you know, they like to go out and paint Black Lives Matter on the sidewalk and bleat about how much they care about Black lives. But the truth is concrete, and actions speak louder than words. And I speak to you as a member of a union of 42,000 subway and bus workers, who 77% of them are people of color. And it's no surprise that the single highest number of deaths due to COVID-19 in this pandemic were from a union of 77% people of color. Up to 140 transit workers died from COVID-19. And they didn't die by accident. They didn't die by some freak occurrence. This wasn't a natural disaster. This was a man-made disaster. This was straight up murder is what it was. They created a vector for the disease to transmit this disease, not just to transit workers, but to their families. Imagine the horror of unknowingly passing on this killer virus to your family member, to your grandfather, to your, to just any family member, or just the general public, and knowing that and having to live with that. This is the horror that they visited on working class communities of color, because like in Katrina, like in Hurricane Katrina, they don't think communities of color, working class people are important enough to have a plan for. They say that Trump doesn't care about science. What are they doing? What are they doing? They're planning to precipitate a second wave just by this one decision. That's what they're doing. You know why the transmission rates have gone down in New York City? Because we're at about 25% of the ridership on the subways and much lower on the buses. And that wasn't because of any plan on their part. It was because people made individual decisions to, you know, work from home, or people lost their jobs. And their plan for the economy is for even more job losses. As Sean said, 22,000 city workers threatened with layoffs. This is the plan. And they say, trust us. They say, we'll keep you safe. We have to say, as working class people, go to hell. Go to hell. How dare you lie to us and tell us you'll keep us safe? You liars, you murderers. You're going to keep us safe? No. As the movement for Black Lives is constantly repeating, we keep us safe. We are the only people in the world that we can trust to keep us safe. And we make this city run, and we can make it stop. And don't you ever forget that. We are the essential workers, and we are not expendable. Okay, we want to work. We work all the time. How about you? How about the billionaires who pay no taxes in the city or state and don't want to give up a dime to save lives? You want to talk to us about the value of work? Go to hell. Go to hell. We have no problem working. We've been doing it our whole lives. Our whole lives are built on work. It's not about not wanting to work. It's about not wanting to die. That's the question. And we're not going to, the teachers and students and family members should not die because of the DOE's contempt for their lives. And until you have a plan, then we have to come up with alternate arrangements. And if teachers need to strike in order to force that to happen, then we will stand in solidarity with them, because working class people have to have each other's backs. And there is no future for the working class except the one that we make through our own struggle. That's why you see MORE leading the way. These are not your elected union leaders. These are rank and file workers who realize that no one's going to fight for them but themselves, and that it's about social justice, that a union, if it's going to survive, has to be about social justice and has to be about solidarity. It's a matter of self-defense. It's a matter of preserving our lives, preserving our institutions, building new institutions, building hope. We are the hope we seek. If we're looking for the capitalist class to provide us hope or to provide us a future, we're going to be sadly mistaken. And ask the 130, 140 transit workers' families who died if there was any hope available for them, if there was any kind of rescue coming for them. So I just want to talk about the New York's school workers solidarity campaign. I'm sorry. We're members of that campaign. There's going to be a rally on Friday at 4 p.m. at 52 Chambers Street over this plan, and we encourage everyone to show up. We'll be there. We encourage transit workers to be there as well. And this fight is far from over. Our union leaders who cut deals behind our backs and closed doors with the bosses who have murdered countless workers have blood on their hands, and they don't speak for us. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, John, for that powerful message of solidarity. Our next speaker, well, I'm just going to invite Tom Shepard, if you're on this call, to speak now. Okay. All right, y'all. Thanks for hanging tough with us. We have our final speaker, who I'm so honored to introduce, Jabari Brisport, former teacher, UFT member, and now District 25 New York State Senator. So Jabari Brisport, you are our last speaker, and then we will take some questions. So hit it.
Thank you so much, Marlena. It's such a pleasure to be on the call. Just thank you to all the educators and students and people on this call, just sharing your stories, being in the space, holding the space, respecting one another, and showing people who are watching what we're about, what people in education are about, which is about protecting our communities. I want to give a special shout out to MORE for the incredible leadership you have shown in this incredibly distressing, disruptive, and confusing time. I've really seen evidence of how you've demonstrated what it truly means to listen to rank and file membership inside of a union, and what it really means to hold democratic decision-making. I want to start by talking about safety, because as everyone on this call knows, our schools are no safer or sanitary or better funded than they were when we left them in March. My school for example, was so underfunded and, that we would have, and overcrowded, that we would have students eating at lunch standing up because there were not enough seats in the cafeteria for all the students we had, or they would sneak away into classrooms. We had situations where students would come asking me for hand sanitizer because there was no soap in the bathroom. We were so underfunded that our printers, our copy machines would break or jam all the time because of all the teachers constantly needing to print materials for students who we could not get textbooks, workbooks, or other materials from. So this is a really, really shame because, again, we are no more safer than we were in March when we left our schools and closed them down. I want to talk about what our union, the U of T, that I'm a proud member of, did a few weeks ago when we circulated a petition getting people to strike, a petition signed by over 100,000 people, including educators like myself, parents, family members, people who cared about this. A petition that said we wanted a nurse in every school, that we wanted to check ventilation systems and upgrade ventilation systems in schools that did not have them. Those have not been addressed in the deal that was cut, and those will not be addressed by September 21st. And I'm so disappointed to see a deal made behind closed doors that veers off what we were all planning to strike over just 48 hours ago. I'm disappointed because it does not address those safety concerns. I'm disappointed because it was undemocratic to do a closed door meeting like that just shortly before a meeting of the Delegate Assembly and force them into a decision that people did not even have a chance to read through adequately with enough time. I'm disappointed mostly because we are a union and we don't need to make deals like this. We can make demands and follow through, okay? We are the UFT, we are the United Federation of Teachers. We are educators. We are people who are respected in our communities because people know that educators show up and show out and give the most for our students. They know that when we give everything we can, and then we find more to give for our students. And when we say it's not safe, we're saying it's not safe for our students, for our families, and the communities that we serve. I'm thinking back to March, and I'm thinking back to how disruptive, incredibly disruptive it was when we shut down with 12 hours notice. How parents emailed me asking me for answers. I had no answers. Nobody had answers because it was done at a moment's notice with no preparation, with not enough chance for people to think even on their feet, and we are headed down that path again because we know that COVID will spike above the 3% threshold if we open up these schools again, and we'll be forced to shut them down remotely. What are we looking at? A month of blended learning, 2 months of blended learning before the cases spike back up and we close again? How can any politician right now say cases won't spike above 3% when we have neighborhoods already above there? Sunset Park hit 6% this summer with schools still closed. How can we say that we are in a place to open these schools safely again? And the fact of the matter is, we don't have to go down this route. We have the opportunity right now to say, we are not going to go blended or even open up until it's safe. We can say it's fully remote until it's safe. Countless school districts around the country are doing that. We are a union. We can sit in our strength and to make these demands. We can go back to the table and say, we want to stay closed until there is a nurse in every school, until we have upgraded our ventilation systems. We can go further and say, we are a union. We will sit in our strength and say, we demand the full funding of our schools. That it is not enough to say that we have a governor that's threatening budget cuts of billions of dollars and maybe we'll fire 9,000 teachers in this city. We can say that's not good enough. We can say that in a state where billionaires have gotten over $77 billion richer since the pandemic began, we can demand the billions of dollars we need, not just for nurses, not just for ventilation systems, but to hire more teachers, to hire more counselors, to get our students the resources they need, and to ensure that we have a safe reopening and a fully funded reopening for once in the history of education in the city. We can do that because we are a union. We are strong. I am a proud union member. We can demand so much more. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jabari Bridgeport. And thank you for ending our discussion today with such power and force as we move forward in this moment. So I know folks probably have questions here. So if you'd like to ask a question, you can select the raise your hand option to put your hand up. And oh, sorry, go ahead, Gia.
What I did was, because of what happened earlier, I made it so that people can't necessarily unmute themselves, but we'll unmute you, just for everybody's security and feeling of safety on Zoom right now, just to recognize what happened earlier. Yeah, thank you so much, Bari and Carla and John, for speaking on the second part of our continued press conference after what's happened. It's helped to kind of help, jog us out and get back to what's important. But yeah, if you put up your hand raise icon, then Marilena can unmute you. There was a question in the first part about, was there a vote for, and I assume that to me, there were two people who messaged me privately in the other first part about the vote. Did members get a chance to vote at the delegate assembly? Did that happen? What I'm going to describe to you is exactly what happens at every gathering whenever we have to have a vote. This goes for contracts, it goes for the MOUs, and situations like this. So there was an agreement yesterday at 9:30 a.m. supposedly between the mayor and UFT President Michael Mulgrew. We found out about it on the news. Then a lot of us knew that there was supposed to be a delegate assembly at 3:30, which if you're a chapter leader or delegate and you represent your school, you're supposed to attend. And we thought we might be voting for a strike authorization and pushing for a membership-wide vote on that, but that's not what happened. Instead, there was an agreement. We didn't get anything in writing. There was nothing in writing. So we walked into the meeting without having anything substantive to even have time to go back to our membership or even to the families to say, there's an agreement. There's an agreement that's been reached. Here it is. Take a look at it. Let's discuss it. Let's debate it. Because chapter leaders and delegates are going to go back at 3:30 and we're supposed to vote on this. No time was given. That's happened with every single contract we've ever had. FYI, the last contract, just to jog people's memory, we had less than 45 minutes to read the entire memorandum of understanding before we were to go to a special delegates assembly to vote. So we didn't even know what we were voting on. This is the same situation, okay? We get there, Michael Mulgrew speaks, we got an hour, for more than half an hour. I timed it. It was like 33 minutes of him speaking, drawn out, slow, summary of the agreement, not anything of substance. He said also in his speech that, even though we called for mandatory universal testing, we knew that was something we weren't going to get. We knew there was going to be some kind of thing with that. We listened to the medical experts, and this is what they told us: the randomized testing is much more effective. And this is what he tells us. No time to actually process any of that information or see it in writing anywhere. Then there's about 12 minutes for questions. This is for a delegate and chapter assembly of 3,200 members. Okay, supposedly that's about how many chapter leaders and delegates there are. 3,200 people. 12 minutes to raise questions. A bunch of us kept hitting the 0 button to be able to ask a question. They took my question, but somehow the questions period ended and they said, that's all the questions we have. So a bunch of us never got to answer our questions. And then we had less than maybe around 10 minutes for debate to be able to speak against or for, again, with 3,200 delegates and chapter leaders. And then we went to a phone vote. I don't even know how legit that was. Press 1 for nay, press 3 for yes, yes, or no, sorry, no, 3 for no. And then within 45 seconds, they had 82% voted yay, that means yes, and 17% for no. And the way that they phrased the resolution was this: the body agrees for safe school reopening, and that it is the governing body that will ensure that all school buildings are safe. That was the gist of it. That's not the exact wording, but that it almost felt like if you voted against it, then you were voting against safe school buildings. That's the way they worded it. There was no specific details in the agreement that we voted on. It was just this resolution. So that some people asked about, and I just wanted to share what that looked like. It was like an hour, boom, decision made.
Thank you for that, Gia. I don't see any raised hands. So if anyone wants to ask a question, you can raise your hand and we can try to answer that right now. And also, I just want to let folks know that this press conference was recorded, and we will release a recording with just the speakers later on today. So we do not have any other questions. And it's been an hour and a half, so I think that we have if you're a union member, we have a call with our president in a few minutes. So I just want to say in closing that it is an honor to build with you all and organize with you all. You guys are my strength. We keep us safe. We do this together. So much love. And if you're feeling like you want to show a reaction and that we're all connected right now, if you could just maybe make a heart or a fist or do something just so we can all see each other, that we're not in the same room, but we're in the same space together. Solidarity, y'all. See you in the streets, y'all.